Thank you very much. I'm extremely glad to be here, and I'm a little bit stressed because when I was a student, my friends were fond of football player, and I was a huge fan of OCaml programmer. So it's a consecration for me. I'm also a little bit embarrassing because the screen is extremely big, so you can see all of my spelling mistakes. And I hope that Raven will be sufficiently mature to fit with my only AI usage, which is correcting typo. And it's also the worst moment to give my presentation because I will use binding operators and I will present a very cheap implementation of runtime types. So it's maybe not the perfect moment to give that presentation. So I work at Tarides and I have a website, xvw.lol. And so here it's the punchline of our presentation. We are making critical system better. Sometimes people think that we are an OCaml company, but it's not the case. In fact, we are a software engineering company, and we always try to find the perfect language for a project. And in a very pragmatic way, we always reach to OCaml. So it's just a pure hazard. So I mainly work on the editor support of OCaml, on Merlin LSP, and especially on the Emacs mod. But this presentation has nothing to do with my work. So we will speak about generative static website, and in a very pompous way, the functional programming way. So it's, we can see a static site generator as a very poor build system with an API tied to deal with the file system. And it will be based on OCaml. So it was very interesting because on the presentation about writing a software without any framework, here my goal is to say, hey, you should use this framework. But we also have testimonials about velocity and speed because we had the time to reach 3 major releases before having a full manual. But now we have a manual. So it's a testimonial that you are extremely fast to ship stuff, but very bad to document stuff. So quickly, what is a static site generator? So it's just a tool that can take some document, make some processing, converting Markdown and org mode to HTML, and put that into something that can be extremely easy to serve. It's an highly specialized build system, and there is a lot of advantage to use that kind of generators. It's extremely easy to deploy. So it's cool. It's also restricts a lot the interaction with user, which is an advantage. Since we see modern social network, it's nice to reduce interaction, but it can be, we can still have interaction using what they call Jamstack, and it's just a way to say that, okay, I cannot have interaction, so I will put JavaScript to interact with concrete service like Discuss. And it can make trivial string extremely complicated. So for example, backlink, transclusion, and also indexes are always complicated. Every time you have to deal with dynamic dependency, it's always complicated. So why use OCaml? Because please stop using Medium. I agree that the UI of Medium is beautiful, but every time I have to read something on Medium, I have a pop-up saying that pardon the interruption. And I need to activate JavaScript and stuff like that, and it's not totally adapted to publish source code and stuff like that. So I think that we should stop using Medium to publish tech article because it's highly customizable, it's fun, and it's written in OCaml. It can be a permanent project because, you know, when we are software engineer, we always try to find side project, and it's always complicated to reach the end of a side project. And with a website, it's a permanent project with a lot of iteration. And we can say that, okay, I know how to use my time on the weekend. And the last point, it's fun. So yes, I think it's maybe a controversial take, but I think that internet was way more fun during the era of GeoCities than Medium, social network, and stuff like that. So creating a static seed generator is extremely easy. Here is an example of a static seed generator. We have just a simple program that will read the first CLI parameter. We will change the name from the base name. We remove the .md. We change it by .html. We compute a target. And after that, we have a magic function that will read the content and extract the set of metadata, what they call the front meter in the Hugo and Jekyll world. And after that, you have a magic function called markdown.offstring that will convert the markdown document to an HTML representation. The name is not very cool. And after that, you have another function that will inject the content and the metadata inside a template called article.html. And when everything is packed, we can just write the file in the target. And we can deal with one article, and we can batch article using a very beautiful technology called Make. And here you have some rule that can generate a static website. There is some interesting stuff. The fact that Make is relatively smart to compute static dependencies. But if you have some expectation about your tool, we can say that it's very sad that we need to repeat dependencies on the Makefile and inside our software, which is very sad. Just out of curiosity, does anyone know YOCaml? Wow, that's a lot of people. And does anyone use YOCaml? Awesome. Wow. Well, there's a lot of people. Cool. So the goal of the presentation is to going further. I was tempted to put some assembly code on my slide, and I remember that this presentation will be probably a stack of not very useful abstraction and will probably lead to something that I cannot read, even if the assembly generated will be good. So yeah, the goal of the presentation is to transmit joy and usage of abstraction instead of performance, even if I'm extremely impressed by people that can make efficient code. So here is a very small program. You will see that I lied on my abstract. So the first question that we want to answer is how to be generic. And we start by trying to abstract the execution of the engine. And after that, with effect and a very cheap EO monad. After that, we will look at data model abstraction. So it's our cheap runtime type using applicative validation to be able to deal with a lot of different kind of metadata. After that, we will try to reach the minimality. So we will going further into the concept of minimality after, but it's the idea that we don't want to perform tasks that do not need to be performed. And here it's the pseudo-categorical part of the presentation, because we will use a strong profunctor plus the category type class, even if we do not have type class in YOCaml, but it's hard to give a meaningful name because everything comes from the Haskell community. So, and yes, the last part was about how to implement a specific feature related to the Xanadu project. In fact, when I was writing my slide, I reached a point that I will probably not have the time to discuss about that, but I'm really open to have this conversation with you after the presentation. It's a little bit sad, and I'm sorry. This is why I said that I lied during my abstract. But if you want to deep dive into concrete implementation of Xanadu backlinks and transclusion, there is the excellent project Forester that uses a very different approach, but that works very well. So let's talk about the execution abstraction, which is a very complicated name for dependency injection. So first, why? So there is the trivial reason. We can abstract over the platform. So sometimes we try to run software on Unix-based distribution, and sometimes, like at Lexify, we run stuff on Windows. It makes everything extremely easy to test because we can just decide that the test context is another platform. And we can support exotic targets, like, for example, the web. We can run the binary of YOKML inside the browser, using, for example, local storage as a file system. I'm not sure if it's useful. We can re-implement Excel in a very non-efficient way, but at least it's possible. And you can, for example, directly generate your website inside a Git repository that can be served using Unipi, for example. And I think that it's what Robur is doing with their site web, which is very cool. And so, the way to deal with dependency injection, there is a lot of way to achieve that in OCaml, and this is probably one of the reasons that OCaml is a very cool language. The first one is using manual encoding, so we can say that I can just abstract the different dependency using functor or for class module. We can also use object-oriented programming that works very well. And we can also give every row explicitly, passing every function in the context. We can try to implement an efficient effect system, for example, based on free or freer monad. We can try to make some tagless final encoding using a module stack, or we can use readrt, or we can use OCaml user-defined effect. You will notice that I say OCaml user-defined effect and not algebraic effect, because I have the very strong intuition that there is no algebraic effect in OCaml, even in OCaml 5. But we can nitpick together about that after the presentation if you want. So we choose user-defined effect for the hype. The first version of YOKML was based on a freer monad, and it was a pain to use, so we decided to go to user-defined effect because it was an hot trend. But during this moment, I published an article on my website saying that why I choose OCaml as a main language. I have a very conflictual interaction on Hacker News. But after that, some people wrote article as an answer of mine. It was very interesting. And one of them was especially explaining how to make dependency injection using objects in OCaml. And since objects in OCaml are extremely rarely used, it was a very nice article that used readrt and the structural subtyping capabilities of object to track dependency in a dynamic way. So I think that this encoding is probably better than using user-defined effect for that specific case. So we have 12 effects. They are not very important. We make a distinction between source and target because sometimes the target is very different than the source. So when we are generating a website from Unix to Unix, there is no difference. But for example, when you are generating a site inside a Git repository, we have a source which is Unix and a target which is a Git repository. So we have a lot of effects, all prefixed by YOKML. Yes. But there is a very sad thing, is that effects are not tracked in the type system, so they can leak extremely quickly. And yeah, trying to deal with user-defined effect, we reach a little bit like when we are dealing with exception, with the fact that we say that this effect is not properly handled. So yes, we have the first part. We can abstract the execution using effect handler, and we can just give a specific effect handler in the text context. But yes, we need to be overly cautious, and it was very complicated from my point of view. And I think that this is one of the main points of using OCaml is to put trust into the compiler. And without that kind of verification, it can be complicated. Even if I understand that for a lot of kind of library, it makes sense to don't particularly take care about type. I think that using user-defined effects are mostly useful for concurrency and when you need to have backtracking. But in many cases, we don't want to deal with the continuation. So we decide to have naive typing, and we decide to just flag functions that may or may not produce effect. And we had a very cheap implementation of an IO monad. So it's just a function from unit to alpha. And I guess that return, bind, map, apply, zip are relatively straightforward. So we have the usual combinators for functor, applicative, and monad. We just have a function perform that will concretely perform the effectful computation. So the idea is to always have to go from the module f. Everything is wrapped into f.ml, and it's to use f.perform one effect in order to produce the effect. And after that, we use, bindings operator to be close as possible to the direct style, but with an explicit marker about effectful computation and regular computation. And here is an example of file exist that will just rely on the function, the effect UKML file exist, and we just perform it. And every of our effect, an effect from that produce a value of A will have the type alpha f.t. Make sense? Cool. So here is a sample function. And we can see that bindings operator do a pretty decent job to be close to the direct style. So yes, we lose direct style, but at least we have a clear separation between pure and impure computation. And we can just have a run function that will just apply unit to our computation alpha t. But in practice, if if we write a new major version of OCaml, we will probably get rid of user-defined effect to go with the reader T encoding, which at least capture every capabilities that will be performed. And so we can have very specific handler for very specific part of the software, and everything becomes easier to test. So now we will speak about the chip runtime type. So there is a lot of format for describing metadata. We have YAML, TOML, JSON, and since we are in OCaml, S-expression. There's also a lot of template language like Jinja. In OCaml, it's called Jingo, Mustache, Liquid, and stuff like that. And we probably don't want to lock our potential user into a very opinionated decision, like it's the case in, for example, Jekyll or Hugo, that bundle their binary with a very strong assumption about what people want to use. So after abstracting execution, we will abstract the notion of key-value language because YAML, TOML, JSON, and S-expression are kind of key-value language. So in this very not beautiful schema, we can see that we can imagine that you have kind of type, for example, article, an option of user, an integer, and a lot of stuff. We can have language like YAML, JSON, S-expression, and we use an intermediate representation called UKML.data.t, and we have function that can project UKML.data.t into a specific representation for being consumed by template. And we can have generic validation that will validate value from UKML.data.t to arbitrary value. This is why it's called cheap runtime type. There is no equality witness, or we just pack everything into data.t. So it introduces an indirection because we need to lift everything into a generic format. But in the previous version of OCaml, we are using a first-class module to just to not have this indirection and to directly move from, for example, data to S-expression. But it was very hard to use, and since we are building a static block generator which is not really used, we can take the decision that, in fact, it's okay to have more allocation. So here is our AST. It's very simple. It looks like the YoJSON save.basic AST. It's totally closed, and I think it's private. It's maybe abstract in OCaml because we think that it's the perfect representation for key-value metadata. And after that, you have a combinator to produce value from that for that kind of AST. And we also have a definition and a validation function. We will see the validation function just after. It seems sufficient. Maybe people can argue that we can add some type or concrete tuple and stuff like that, but in practice, it's sufficient for a lot of websites. And here is an example of a validation function. So the goal is to validate an article, and we suppose that we have 3 fields, 2 required and 1 optional. And we can see every different part of the validation pipeline. So we use binding operators. So let plus, which is a map, and n plus, which is the monoidal product. And the idea is that every time we want to validate field of a record, we lift error into one semi-group in order to collect every error, because it's a dark pattern, so that, okay, your first field is bad, you fix it, and after that your compiler says, the second one is bad too. It's a very kind of cheap type recovery at the validation level. So record is also a regular validator, so we can use it as a validator for another field, for example. And here we have just regular validator, so we take a data.t element, we take a validator, so a function from data.t to alpha, and it produces a validated value, which is a result. And here we can see that the validated article is an article validator, so it's perfect. We can use our validator to validate other stuff, and we have composition, and it's a kind of runtime type. We can ask if there is a deriver for that, but to be honest, I hate PPX deriving because I think it makes sense for equality and maybe for debugging information, but for comparison or serialization, for me, it makes no sense. I want to have a fine control, and I don't want to use attribute to say that, okay, I have this record, and in this specific case, I want to use using a string this function. For me, it's perfectly okay to write that kind of function, which are extremely readable. So I think that this implementation that mostly rely on applicative gives us some insight about the main difference between applicative and monad. With applicative, we can perform parallel tasks. And so we can have the capability of static analysis on top of FX sequence, because we know that everything will be performed, and after that, we finalize with one result. So everything is computed in parallel, and we can reach everything into just one single point. And monad can obviously perform sequential tasks with a kind of dynamic behavior. And so it's nice because we can mix both of them, for example, using monad to handle pre or post condition in our validation pipeline. So now let's talk about minimality. So yes, the idea is to not perform tasks that are already performed. So here is a very unclear schema that said that, okay, I have a file A and B, I have edge of dependency, and for example, if I update capitalize B, I have to update b.md and b.out. But if I update A, I need to update a.md, a.out, b.md, and b.out. And if I update only a.md, I just have to update a.out. Okay? So if we look at our first complicated static block generator, we can see that we can split everything in 5 big steps. The first one is we compute the target, we can rely only on the file name. After that, we read the file, we convert it, we inject it using our template engine, and we write the file. So if we decide that the main operation of the program is to write a file, we can imagine that we have a function create file, and you have just 3 tasks that need to be performed in order to create a file. So read the file, convert it, and inject it using article.html. And we can say that you have two static dependencies. So by static dependency, we know the set of dependencies just looking at the code. It's the file that we give as an argument and the article.html. So we can have a very complicated heuristic to define if we need to create the file or not. Say, if the target does not exist, we need to create the target, obviously. And if it exists, but the M time, the modification time of the target is smaller than the maximal M time of the source or the... I put target, it was a mistake. It was source or article.html. We know that there is a modification and we need to recompute the target. Okay? Cool. So we decide to have a very small type called task, and we can imagine that we have a function create file that will take a path, which is the target, and a task. So here it's from unit to string. So we give unit and we produce a string, and the goal is to write it. I maybe forgot to put an f.t at the end of unit. So yes, when we give the task, we should be able to, without executing it, extract static dependencies to apply our very complicated heuristic. So the type of task is extremely simple. We have an action, which for people that are familiar with that kind of signature, it's the Kleefsli arrow for the monad f.t. And we have a set of depths, which is just a set of paths. So we can perform the action, just deconstructing action from a record and applying X to the action. And we can lift it. Okay, because on the screen there is 8 minutes left. Ah. Okay, I will speak faster. So we have a lift function that can just transform a regular function into a task. So what this means, we just perform the function and we wrap it using return, and we do not have any dependency. So we wrap it into the empty with the empty set. We can have a function that will do nothing but just add a file into the set of dependency. So it's track file, and we just return. So if you take unit, it returns unit. And we have just one file, which is the file that we want to track. So it's important to notify that track file is a function that returns a task. And so we can imagine a read file function, a read file task. So also it's a function that takes a file and returns a task. We use our effect read file. And we just add, we just create a singleton with the file as a dependency. So currently we cannot express read file in terms of track file because we cannot compose task, which is a little bit sad. So here is a function for task composition. So globally, the fact that you are composing task is just the union of the two sets of dependency, and it's the sequential execution of the first task and the second one. So we compute the first task and we give the result to the second one. It's also the Kleefsli composition in this case. And we produce a new task that wrap the two new fields computed. So it looks like a function, but it's not a function. We know that we can sequentially compose tasks. It's cool. And in fact, we are in the magic of Eiger-Candade abstraction. Some people say that there is no Eiger-Candade type in OCaml, but they are liars because we have Eiger-Candade type in the module language. And by this magic, we can generate a lot of combinators. We will see them extremely quickly because I'm a little bit late. So just for the categorical jargon, a task is just a semigroupoid associated with a profunctor with a strength tensor that we can call arrow. So here is a very hard to understand schema that says that if I have a task from A to B and a task from B to C, I can produce a task from E to C. Okay. We have FST. So since we are not dealing with the grammar of our language, we are relying on point-free programming. We need to have combinator to be able to express everything. So here is a function which is called FST that will transform a function from A to B, a task from A to B into a task from A, C BC, and so the idea is just to apply a function on the first element, and it will produce a slot for the second element. And there is the SND task, which does the same but on the second element. And since we know that when we can deal with one value, it's okay. When we can deal with pair, we can deal with arbitrary a number of parameters. So we need to make point freestyle to compose very simple tasks. It's very cool. There is also this one that will apply two inputs and produce a new arrow. There is this one that will give one input to one arrow, to two arrows. And so yes, we need to use point-free programming, which is very bad because we hate point-free. Everyone hates point-free. And in fact, it's more complicated to do point-free programming in OCaml than in Haskell because of the value restriction. But it's extremely powerful. So for example, here we have a task that can pipe file. And so the idea is we have a function, we create a new slot with unit. After that, we read we fill the unit with the task read file, and after that, we concatenate everything. So it's extremely readable, it's very nice, it's the power of Arrow. In practice, we just use that three operators, and here is some real world code. So we will write a file, and we will track the source binary. After that, we will read a file with metadata using YAML as a language, and we will use a module to describe the set of metadata, so the validation rule. We will use Markdown to convert stuff from Markdown to HTML, and after that, we inject it into a template. It's very beautiful, but so it's nice. But yeah, we add point-free. So OCaml is very cool. There is an applicative API. So we can rewrite. Here is an example of using the applicative API. Why does it work? It's because under every arrow, yield an applicative. So the idea is a function from unit, a task from unit to alpha is an alpha applicative. So we can use this with some trick. Sometimes we generate function because we want to handle the fact that we can apply stuff with dependency. But it's almost the same API and maybe more readable. So sometimes arrows give more control. Sometimes we need to cheat using complicated applicative composition. But usually when a task depends on the result of the previous one, arrow are a best fit for that. So we reached the end. Sorry, 2 minutes. It's okay. OCaml is just a DSL for building static website. You can try it. The code is on the GitHub of XHTMLBoy. You can find an API documentation, and there is now a tutorial that explains how to create a blog from scratch using OCaml. So now you understand the low-level implementation of OCaml. You can re-implement it because it's so cool to reinvent the wheel and no more framework. But OCaml has some advantage. It's maintained, true story, and it's used by other users than the maintainers, which is a great success story. It's well documented, in fact, with API. Doc gives an example. There is a lot of plugins based on popular libraries, so Markdown, Mustache, Template, RSS, and Atom, syntax highlighting, and Git. There is a lot of features that were not covered in this presentation, like handling dynamic dependencies, cache, and snapshot. But yes, maintaining your own website is extremely cool, and you definitely should do it. And ideally implemented in OCaml. Thank you very much. And I think that I know time for question.
Yeah, thank you, Xavier. I never thought I will see the talk about category theory stuff and HTML generation. So, any questions?
Yes. Sorry, I closed my computer, but I can try to answer to questions.
Sure. Any questions?
This seems fairly powerful. So has anyone used this for something other than static site generation?
Yeah. It can be useful. You can rewrite Excel in a very non-performant way. And we also use it for the for the tutorial of YOCaml, we use it to generate Dune library because it's always complicated for me to read the Dune manual, so I prefer to use YOCaml to add a new indirection in my pipeline.
Thanks.
Okay. Anything else? Yeah. Okay.
Very short. Why is the name YOCaml?
The first name was WordPress because it was a tool to make blog, but we were thinking that it was not maybe a nice name because every time you speak about WordPress, a lot of people say, "Ah, yes, I know it's for building blog," and we say, "Oh yes, wow." And so we decided to rename it YOCaml because it was a cool project, and so YOCaml.
Cool. Thanks for the talk. I have a more, also weird question, but maybe sort of talking about the arrows and applicatives that you talk about. So you say arrows, you have to program them point free. Maybe I didn't quite catch that, but are there any sort of attempts at like having a direct style programming paradigm with arrows and maybe applicatives, but not monads? I guess when you get effects, that ends up being a direct style monadic. But what about applicatives and arrows?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know. I know that there is, for me, it was more easier to work with binding operators. We can probably imagine other encoding, and I know that, for example, last year there was a split arrow presentation about using the applicative part and the heap to collect the static part of the dynamic part of the arrow. And I know that there is some set of encoding, but we are thinking that it's sufficient to build a blog. So, yeah. But we are open to Pierre, and we are open to rewrite everything from scratch because every new version of YOCaml is totally a full set of breaking change. So why not a third breaking change?
All right, thanks.
Okay, great. One more round of applause for Xavier.
Thank you.